is somebody I've known for many years and worked with and admired, who I believe was one of the first soldiers in Vietnam who came back and told the truth of Agent Orange dioxin that was being used there. He's a wonderful poet and writer and organizer. And please welcome Dan Barry, who Poet Laureate of Veterans for Peace and one of the founders of Vietnam Veterans Against the War.
Then I have to read a poem, and I didn't bring any, but I remember they're online now. This poem is called Singing Out. How big would the war memorial wall be if it listed all the names of soldiers who died of suicide? Abel, Baker, Charlie, Jacob, David, George, 3 tours in Afghanistan, Jeffrey, Lucy, Marine vet of Iraq invasion, Theodore S. Westhuizen, Colonel, U.S. Army, who wrote in Iraq death before being dishonored. I couldn't write about the first Vietnam vet I knew who killed himself. I couldn't write about him. I couldn't write his obit because newspaper policy prohibited reporting suicide. I didn't know what to do with that muzzling. The second vet I knew who killed himself was found with a copy of one of my writings in his wallet. We cannot protect our buddies. We cannot protect our friends with words alone. We need to change our apocalyptic, hellacious, hell-bent, death-dealing culture. Our flag-flapping, sword-saluting, sworn to secrecy, stiff upper lip, suck-it-up, He-Man, Iron Man, military mindset. We need to transform the death before dishonor, the code seated in our souls. We're singing out for life, for a lifetime. Singing out to challenge, to change our dancing with death. Thank you.
I think it's new music. Oh my goodness, it's a heliport. Just to be reassured that it's a helicopter, it's not a drone, not yet. And the heliport is right there. Our next speakers are here to talk about what they've seen in Vietnam. They were just there with the last Veterans for Peace contingent. And bear with us, this is last minute, and it's just a pleasure to welcome them to Veterans for Peace and hear what they have to say about Vietnam today. They were just there, so.
Hi, my name is Brian McKay. I went to Vietnam in 1967. With the Air Force and the tactical air squadron. And I was stationed in Da Nang, Vietnam for 12 months from January 1967 until, luckily for me, I left the night before the Tet Offensive started in January 1968. I was in a career field. There wasn't a choice. I didn't want to go be drafted into the Army and go to Vietnam that way. And I was only allowed a 6-month deferment because I didn't start college in February right out of high school, which would have been graduating on Thursday, starting on Monday. So I was only allowed because they said I waited till after summer, and they said that weren't serious about going to school, so you could only get 6 months. And I said, well, I wanted 4 years. And they said, well, you're not going to have that. So I enlisted in the Air Force. My recruiter told me, I told him I had 2 interests. I said I either want to be a fireman or in photography. And he said, no problem, you'll get one of those. And I was too young to think about saying we could put that in writing. And I got my orders after boot camp, and it said you're going to be an aerospace munitions specialist, and you're going to school in Denver, Colorado, the Lowry Air Force Base. I had a guy in my squadron that said, what are your orders for? And I said, they're sending me to be a aerospace munitions specialist. And I said, I talked to a major who was a psychiatrist, and I told him that I didn't like to be around weapons and fireworks, and my family never had any guns in the house. And he said, that's what I wanted to be. And I said, well, what did you get? He said, I'm going to be in a photography studio in North Dakota, an Air Force base. And we thought, well, we have the same last name, almost. MCC name, mine was an MCC name. And so we went to our drill instructor and we said, we think our orders were switched. And the drill instructor cussed me out, told me to get out of his face, or he would give me 4 more weeks of boot camp. So I became an aerospace munitions specialist. Went to Vietnam. I just turned 20 and worked on a flight line doing something I didn't really want to do, which was loading bombs, rockets, missiles on F-4 Phantom aircraft for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and every 3rd Sunday off. And so I made it through that year. I was in Da Nang. Da Nang was known as Rocket City, and there were several rocket attacks. The rockets all came from Russia, and the joke was that they were ignited by French batteries. But there was some serious attacks on the base. There was like 16 airplanes lost in one night, and a number of firemen, when a plane that was on fire for too long blew up a fire truck and killed firemen. And so there was lots of different things going on, but I made it through my year and ended up back at George Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert loading practice bombs for pilot training and kicking flares out of the back of C-130 over the desert. But last spring, around this time, I saw a friend from San Diego, and he said he and his wife were going to Vietnam. And I said, how'd you come about doing that? And he said, well, Veterans for Peace in San Francisco has a group to travel there, and you sign up, you pay $1,000 donation, and then you pay for the amount of travel in Vietnam. And it started in Hanoi and went to Da Nang, Nguyen, and Hue, and trying to see where else. We ended up, after about 18 days, in Saigon. And it was the most wonderful trip. The Vietnamese people are the loveliest people you will ever meet. And their saying was, Vietnam Vietnam is a country, not a war. And there was never any hatred toward, there was about 18 of us, and there was no hatred toward us whatsoever. And we were in all different places, and we met Vietnamese, North Vietnamese fighters one day that happened to be in the same place we were. It wasn't planned. And we all sat down and we had an interpreter and we shared our experiences, and we all got up and shook hands later, and it was a very moving experience. And there was even a writer from Der Spiegel, the German magazine, who wrote about the trip. He mostly focused on one of the veterans that was with us that was really still having a bit of PTSD, and he was on several mountaintops just slightly below the DMZ. He was a 23-year-old lieutenant in the Marine Corps, and his job was to give coordinates to his 10 howitzer units that were on the hilltop to fire wherever he was told the coordinates for. And it was very interesting to be along with him, and he expressed how it changed him and changed how he felt about the war. But, this is my son Tom.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. I just wanted to reintroduce my father, Brian McKay, and say thank you for the opportunity. So I just wanted to reintroduce one more time my father, Brian McKay, served in the Air Force, United States Air Force in 1967 for 1 year, and so through Veterans for Peace, as he said, we were able to make a trip with a number of other veterans who served. I am not a veteran, obviously I wasn't in Vietnam, so my perspective on this trip through Veterans for Peace was really one of an outsider. So I've never been to Southeast Asia, never been to Vietnam, didn't really have too much experience with former conflict zones. I'd never really been in places that, for example, had a demilitarized zone. So one of the things that really stood out on our trip that Brian really made reference to was a moment when we, which I would say probably a delegation of about maybe 20 people, many of whom were veterans, we did meet and cross paths completely unplanned with a contingent of North Vietnamese soldiers who were all in the same, they'd all served in the same unit basically. So they all had their military fatigues on. The veterans, the American veterans that we were with, none of us had any kind of military attire on. So just by happenstance, we crossed paths with these former North Vietnamese military service members, and we had the opportunity to, as Brian said, sit down with one another, and it was an incredible moment for somebody who, you know, has never been in an active war zone, never really been in a conflict zone. Through my father, I've been aware of the Vietnam War my entire life, and through that perspective, it really changed a lot of things that I considered in terms of. For example, when I was a child, I really wanted to be in the military itself, and hearing Brian's experiences really changed my sense of that kind of involvement in armed services. So when we were sitting down, when the Americans and the former North Vietnamese were sitting there, it was this incredible moment because there was a language barrier. They could not really speak effectively to one another, and we did have a translator, so the message did get across. But really what was palpable in that room was just this emotion, this kind of catharsis, this relief of tension, this kind of sense of forgiveness between both sides. It was unspoken. It wasn't necessarily something that was directly said, but it was this moment where you could see, you have these foreigners who came to, their country, Vietnam, and did things that were really atrocious. We saw hillsides that had been, destroyed by the chemical weapons that the United States military dropped on Vietnam. We learned about the many different kinds of chemicals that the United States, it wasn't just Agent Orange, for example, all kinds of things that really shaped the fabric of life in Vietnam, which we also saw as a direct result in the sense that we traveled to Hue, which was very close to the demilitarized zone, and as a result had some of the highest per capita artillery, or conventional artillery munitions dropped. And so to this day, there's still thousands of unexploded ordnances that different groups are trying to A, find, and B, safely remove. And so it was amazing to see that work is still ongoing, that it continues to be such an issue. And in some cases, there was as many as I want to say about 8,000 unexploded ordnances that were just known in one single province in central Vietnam. So to understand the scope and the impact of the war itself, from the perspective of seeing it firsthand in a country where people to this day might go out in the field to, do what they need to do for their day's work, and suddenly be blinded by an unexploded ordnance, or to lose a limb, or a child playing. And it makes you think about ongoing conflicts. As obviously we've been referring to the Israeli occupation in the Palestinian territories, Gaza itself, those kinds of things are happening right now. And it really hit home for me, seeing those kinds of things that were from 50 years ago or more, that continue to have a huge impact on conflicts today. So I really just wanted to say thank you all for allowing me the time to speak. Thanks to my father for being there. Thank you very much, Anthony, for accompanying us, being a voice of reason on our trip in many ways. And thank you all for the opportunity. And let's take a moment to remember those who died in this conflict. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
I would like to ask, I know there are people here, guys here, who in fact served in Vietnam, and it's important to recognize their courage and how difficult it has been a journey for them to remember what happened all those years ago. And you can hear how the pain of being there, of being part of this war, and being so very young, but carrying that emotional memory back home with you. So if it's okay, would you all who were in Vietnam, and I know you've been back there, just raise your hand so that we can recognize you, and recognize you for your courage of going back there and coming face to face with the Vietnamese people. Come on, folks. I know you're here. And thank you. I just would like to say thank you for your service for peace and for coming back and talking about what your experience was, and to keep us going in our ever struggle for peace in this country. Thank you. Singing is next, because I think